Have you ever met someone and felt something shift inside you almost immediately? Not because of what they said, not because of how they looked, but because something about their presence felt strangely familiar, as if a quiet part of you recognized them before your mind could explain why. It's a strange experience when it happens. You try to treat it like any normal interaction. You tell yourself not to read too much into it. And yet, something inside you keeps returning to the same question. Why does this connection feel different? Because in life, we meet many people. Some conversations fade the moment they end. Some faces disappear from memory within days. But every once in a while, someone enters your life and leaves an impression that refuses to disappear. You may only speak for a short time. You may only cross paths briefly, and yet the feeling remains. It lingers quietly in the background of your thoughts. And that can be confusing, because when something feels important, we expect it to be obvious. We expect clear signs, clear answers, clear direction. But sometimes the deepest connections in life don't arrive with clarity. They arrive with questions. Questions like, why do I feel comfortable with this person so quickly? Why do conversations with them seem effortless, even when we barely know each other? Why does their presence feel calm instead of overwhelming? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, why do they stay on my mind even when nothing dramatic has happened between us? Many people experience moments like this, yet they often dismiss them. They assume it's imagination or coincidence. But what if that feeling is not random? What if there is something deeper happening beneath the surface of the mind? Something subtle, something invisible. Because long before two people fully understand each other, something else may already be at work. Something that operates quietly within the subconscious mind. And when that deeper level of the mind recognizes harmony between two people, it leaves behind a very specific feeling, a feeling most people overlook, a feeling that doesn't shout for attention, but instead whispers gently within the heart. And understanding that feeling may reveal far more about human connection than most people realize. Before we go any deeper into this idea, there is something important you need to understand. If you have ever felt confused about a connection with someone, if you have ever questioned your feelings, or wondered whether a relationship meant something deeper than it appeared, there is nothing wrong with you. In fact, the confusion many people feel in relationships is incredibly common, not because people are incapable of love, but because most of us were never taught how relationships actually work at the deeper level of the mind. From a very young age, we are given a certain picture of what love is supposed to look like. We are told it should be obvious, instant, unmistakable. We are shown stories where two people meet, everything feels magical, and from that moment forward, there is no doubt about the connection. But real life rarely follows that script. Real relationships are more complex. Sometimes two people meet and feel an immediate sense of familiarity, yet circumstances around them seem unclear. Timing feels uncertain, questions arise that neither person knows how to answer. And when this happens, many people assume something must be wrong. They begin to doubt themselves. They begin to question whether their feelings are misguided. But according to the teachings of Joseph Murphy, much of this confusion comes from misunderstanding the role of the subconscious mind in human relationships. Murphy believed that the subconscious mind is constantly shaping our experiences in ways we do not consciously see. It responds to our beliefs, our emotional patterns, and the quiet assumptions we carry about ourselves and others. These patterns operate beneath the surface of our awareness, quietly influencing the people we feel drawn toward. This means that many of the connections we experience in life are not purely logical. They are psychological, emotional, subconscious, and because these forces operate beneath conscious awareness, they often create feelings that are difficult to explain. You might meet someone and feel unusually comfortable with them. Conversation flows easily. Silence does not feel awkward. You feel understood in a way that surprises you. And yet, at the same time, your conscious mind may struggle to interpret what is happening. You begin asking yourself questions. Am I imagining this? Is this connection real? Why does this feel so natural? And when answers do not immediately appear, the mind often fills the silence with doubt. This is not a sign of weakness. It is simply the result of a mind trying to analyze something that is not purely logical. You see, the subconscious mind communicates through feelings more than words. It recognizes emotional patterns. It responds to subtle signals of harmony between two people. But because we live in a world that values logic above intuition, many people learn to ignore these subtle signals. They distrust their own inner responses. They convince themselves that if something cannot be explained clearly, it must not be important. Yet some of the most meaningful experiences in life cannot be fully explained through logic alone. Think about the moments when you instantly felt comfortable with someone you had just met, or the times when a conversation with someone felt effortless, as if the interaction required no effort at all. These experiences often reveal something deeper than coincidence. They reveal the quiet recognition that occurs when two inner worlds resonate in a compatible way. But because we are rarely taught to trust these experiences, people often dismiss them. They assume that meaningful relationships should always follow a predictable pattern. They expect dramatic passion, immediate certainty, clear external signs, and when those signs do not appear right away, they conclude that the connection must not be important. But Murphy's teachings suggest something very different. He explained that the subconscious mind operates through impressions that are subtle, gradual, and often misunderstood. A meaningful connection may not immediately announce itself. Instead, it may unfold quietly, through small moments of recognition, through feelings of emotional ease, through the sense that something about the interaction feels natural rather than forced. And this quiet naturalness is something many people overlook, because modern culture often celebrates intensity more than stability, excitement more than peace, drama more than harmony. Yet the subconscious mind does not respond to noise. It responds to emotional certainty, to patterns of belief, to the deeper signals that two individuals are emotionally compatible. Which means that if you have ever experienced a connection that felt calm, natural, and strangely familiar, but struggled to explain it, that experience does not mean you were confused. It simply means your subconscious mind may have been recognizing something your conscious mind had not yet understood. And once you begin to see relationships from this perspective, you stop assuming that uncertainty is a problem. Instead, you begin to see it as the mind gradually becoming aware of something deeper that is already unfolding beneath the surface. Now that we understand why confusion around relationships is so common, we can begin to look at something even more important. The mistake most people make when trying to understand whether a connection is meaningful. And interestingly, it is a mistake that almost everyone makes without realizing it. When people try to determine if a relationship is meant to be, they usually look for evidence outside themselves. They analyze behavior. They measure effort. They watch for signals that confirm whether the other person feels the same way. And while these observations can sometimes be useful, they often cause people to overlook the most important information available to them: their own inner response. Because when two people meet, the conscious mind immediately begins evaluating the situation. It asks questions like, do we have things in common? Does this relationship make logical sense? Will other people approve of this connection? But the subconscious mind operates very differently. It does not evaluate relationships through logic alone. Instead, it responds to emotional impressions, subtle signals of familiarity, patterns of belief that exist beneath conscious awareness. And because of this difference, many people unintentionally ignore the deeper signals that their own mind is providing. For example, someone may meet a person who makes them feel calm and comfortable. Conversation feels natural. There is no pressure to impress, no sense of needing to perform. But because this experience does not feel dramatic or intense, the conscious mind begins to question it. It begins to compare the experience to what it believes love should look like. And this is where confusion often begins, because many people have been taught that love must feel overwhelming, passionate, even chaotic. Movies and stories often portray relationships as emotional storms, Moments of extreme excitement followed by moments of conflict and tension. And over time, people begin to associate intensity with importance. They assume that if a connection is truly meaningful, it must feel powerful and consuming. But according to the teachings of Joseph Murphy, the subconscious mind does not recognize chaos as harmony. It recognizes peace, stability, emotional alignment. Murphy often explained that the subconscious mind responds to beliefs and emotional patterns that feel natural and accepted, which means that when a relationship creates a sense of ease within the mind, it is often a sign of compatibility at the deeper level of the psyche. Yet many people misinterpret this feeling. Instead of appreciating the calmness of the connection, they assume something is missing. They believe the relationship lacks excitement. They wonder if the connection is too simple, and as a result, they may walk away from relationships that could have been deeply meaningful. At the same time, they may become drawn toward relationships that create emotional turbulence, because turbulence feels intense, and intensity is often mistaken for passion. But emotional turbulence is frequently a sign that unresolved beliefs and fears are being activated within the subconscious mind. Old patterns, past experiences, unconscious expectations about love. These patterns can create relationships that feel exciting at first but gradually become unstable. This does not mean those relationships are meaningless. They may still provide important lessons, but they often require a great deal of emotional struggle. Murphy believed that the subconscious mind always seeks harmony. It moves toward experiences that match the beliefs we carry within ourselves. Which means that if someone carries fears about love, they may repeatedly find themselves drawn into relationships that reflect those fears. Not because those relationships are destined, but because the mind is repeating familiar emotional patterns. And this is where many people become trapped. They assume that emotional intensity means the relationship is important. They chase the feeling of excitement. They pursue connections that keep them in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. Yet deep down, something inside them often feels unsettled, because the subconscious mind is not searching for chaos, it is searching for alignment. And alignment rarely feels dramatic. It feels natural, quiet, almost effortless. But recognizing this requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking, does this relationship feel exciting enough? The more important question becomes, does this relationship create harmony within my mind? Do I feel emotionally stable around this person? Do I feel comfortable being myself? Does conversation flow without strain? Do I feel calmer in their presence rather than more anxious? These are the kinds of signals the subconscious mind responds to. Yet, because they are subtle, many people overlook them. They continue searching for relationships that produce dramatic emotions, believing that those emotions must indicate destiny. But Murphy's teachings suggest something different. Destiny is not usually recognized through emotional chaos. It is recognized through emotional coherence, through the quiet feeling that something about the connection fits naturally into the structure of your life. Not because it overwhelms you, but because it stabilizes you. And once you begin to understand this shift in perspective, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing relationships that feel intense but unstable. You begin recognizing the deeper signals of harmony that the subconscious mind quietly reveals. And this realization prepares us to understand the deeper principle behind the one sign that truly reveals when two people are meant to be together. To truly understand why certain people enter our lives and leave such a powerful impression, we must first understand a deeper principle about the mind, a principle that was often emphasized by Joseph Murphy. Murphy taught that the subconscious mind is not passive. It is constantly active, quietly shaping our experiences according to the beliefs, expectations, and emotional patterns we carry within ourselves. Most people assume that life unfolds purely through external events. They believe relationships happen because of chance, because two people happen to meet at the same place at the same time. But Murphy believed something more profound was taking place beneath the surface. He explained that the subconscious mind operates according to a simple yet powerful law. It continuously expresses whatever ideas and emotional impressions we accept as true. This means the mind is always working to create experiences that match our inner beliefs, including the people we are drawn toward. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever noticed how certain types of people seem to appear repeatedly in someone's life? Some individuals repeatedly attract supportive, uplifting relationships. Others find themselves involved in relationships filled with conflict or emotional distance. At first glance, these patterns may appear to be coincidences. But according to Murphy's understanding of the subconscious mind, they are reflections of deeper mental impressions. The mind tends to recreate experiences that match the emotional patterns it has accepted as familiar. This does not mean people consciously choose these patterns. Most of the time they are completely unaware of them. But the subconscious mind does not require conscious awareness to operate. It simply responds to the beliefs that exist beneath the surface. Murphy described the subconscious mind as a kind of creative intelligence. It does not argue with our beliefs. It simply accepts them and begins expressing them in our experiences. If someone deeply believes they are worthy of love, support, and respect, their subconscious mind begins guiding them toward relationships that reflect those beliefs. If someone carries hidden fears of rejection or abandonment, those fears may quietly influence the types of relationships they experience, not because the person wants those outcomes, but because the subconscious mind expresses what it accepts as familiar. Now here is where this principle becomes incredibly important when it comes to relationships. When two people meet who share compatible subconscious patterns, something very interesting begins to happen. Their emotional worlds resonate with each other. They begin to experience a subtle sense of recognition, not because they have known each other before in the ordinary sense, but because their inner beliefs and emotional rhythms are compatible. Murphy often suggested that harmony between two people is not created only through shared interests or similar personalities. It is created through alignment at the deeper level of the mind. Two people may appear very different on the surface. Different hobbies, different backgrounds, different personalities. Yet if their subconscious patterns resonate, the connection between them can feel surprisingly natural. On the other hand, two people may appear perfectly compatible on paper. They may share similar lifestyles, interests, and goals. Yet something about the connection feels strained. Conversation requires effort. Misunderstandings occur frequently. Emotional tension appears without clear explanation. This happens because compatibility is not determined solely by external factors. It is determined by the deeper patterns operating within the subconscious mind. Murphy believed that when two individuals carry beliefs and emotional impressions that support harmony, their connection naturally becomes stable and cooperative. Not because they never face challenges, but because their subconscious expectations support understanding rather than conflict. And when this kind of inner compatibility exists, the relationship begins to develop a very specific quality. It begins to feel natural, not forced, not constantly uncertain, but quietly aligned. You do not feel as though you are trying to convince the other person to understand you. Communication flows more easily. Emotional responses feel balanced. There is less need to prove yourself, less pressure to perform. The connection begins to resemble something more like a shared rhythm than a constant negotiation. Murphy often explained that the subconscious mind responds strongly to feelings of acceptance and harmony. When these feelings exist between two individuals, the mind naturally reinforces them. Both people begin behaving in ways that support the relationship rather than undermine it. They listen more carefully. They respond more thoughtfully. They resolve misunderstandings more easily. Because at the deeper level of the mind, the relationship feels safe. And safety allows the subconscious mind to express its most constructive patterns. But when subconscious patterns clash, the opposite often occurs. Small disagreements escalate quickly. Miscommunication becomes frequent. Emotional defensiveness appears. And even if both people genuinely care about each other, the relationship can feel exhausting, because the subconscious expectations operating beneath the surface are not aligned. This is why Murphy emphasized that the most meaningful relationships are not built solely through effort. They are supported by harmony at the deeper level of the mind. And when that harmony exists, it produces a subtle but powerful effect. An effect that becomes the clearest sign that two people may truly belong in each other's lives. But the remarkable thing is that this sign is not something dramatic or obvious. In fact, many people overlook it entirely. Because it does not announce itself loudly, it appears quietly. Through a feeling so simple that people often dismiss it. Yet once you recognize this feeling and understand what it means, you begin to see relationships in a completely different way. After understanding how the subconscious mind shapes our experiences and influences the people we feel drawn toward, we can now return to the central question. What is the one sign that two people are truly meant to be together? The answer may be far simpler than most people expect. According to the principles taught by Joseph Murphy, when two individuals are deeply aligned at the level of the subconscious mind, their connection produces a very specific inner experience. Peace, not temporary excitement, not emotional chaos, not the kind of intensity that leaves the mind restless and uncertain, but peace, a calm, steady feeling that appears within the mind when you are around that person. And this peace is not something that needs to be forced. It arises naturally. You feel more relaxed in their presence. Your thoughts become quieter. You do not feel the need to constantly prove yourself or impress them. You simply feel comfortable being who you are. Many people overlook this feeling because it is subtle. It does not resemble the dramatic portrayals of love that appear in movies or stories. There are no overwhelming emotional storms, no constant uncertainty. Instead, there is something much quieter, a sense that the connection itself feels stable, grounded, real. When two people are aligned at the subconscious level, their emotional worlds begin to support each other. Conversation flows easily. Silence does not feel awkward. Time spent together feels natural rather than forced. You may notice that you are able to express thoughts and feelings more honestly. There is less fear of being misunderstood, less anxiety about saying the wrong thing, and perhaps most importantly, there is a feeling that you do not need to change who you are in order to maintain the connection. You feel accepted as you are. This acceptance creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is one of the most powerful signs of subconscious harmony between two people. Murphy believed that the subconscious mind naturally seeks harmony and balance. When two individuals share compatible emotional patterns, their presence begins reinforcing that balance within each other. This is why peaceful connections often feel deeply comforting. They allow both individuals to relax, to express themselves freely, to grow without constantly feeling judged or threatened. But many people misunderstand this experience because they have been conditioned to associate love with emotional intensity. They believe a relationship must feel overwhelming in order to be meaningful. They expect dramatic passion, constant excitement, and powerful emotional swings. And when a connection feels calm instead of chaotic, they begin to question it. They wonder if something is missing. They wonder if the relationship lacks passion. But Murphy's teachings suggest that emotional chaos is rarely a sign of deep harmony. More often, it is a reflection of unresolved fears and subconscious conflicts. True alignment does not destabilize the mind, it stabilizes it. You begin to feel more balanced, more centered, more emotionally secure. This does not mean the relationship will never face challenges. All relationships require communication, patience, and understanding. But when two subconscious minds resonate in harmony, those challenges do not destroy the foundation of the connection. Instead, they become opportunities for growth. The underlying sense of peace remains. Even during moments of disagreement or uncertainty, something deeper continues holding the connection together. A quiet recognition that the relationship itself is not fragile, it feels solid, reliable, and perhaps the most interesting part of this experience is that the peace it creates often extends beyond the relationship itself. People frequently notice that when they are connected to someone who aligns with them at the subconscious level, other areas of life begin feeling more stable as well. Their thoughts become clearer, Their emotional reactions become calmer. They feel more confident expressing their authentic self. This happens because the subconscious mind is no longer operating in a state of tension or defense. It recognizes harmony, and when harmony is present, the mind relaxes. It begins supporting growth instead of constantly scanning for emotional threats. Murphy often emphasized that the subconscious mind accepts whatever emotional impressions feel natural and true. When a relationship creates peace, comfort, and emotional balance, the mind gradually accepts that connection as safe and supportive. It begins reinforcing the relationship rather than resisting it, and over time, this reinforcement strengthens the bond between two people. They learn to trust each other more deeply. They communicate with greater honesty. They develop a sense of partnership that feels stable rather than uncertain. This is why peace is such an important sign. It is not simply the absence of conflict. It is the presence of emotional harmony, the feeling that two inner worlds are cooperating rather than competing. When this kind of harmony appears, it often signals something profound. It suggests that the subconscious patterns of both individuals are compatible, that their emotional rhythms support each other rather than disrupt each other. And when two people create that kind of peace within each other's minds, they may have discovered something rare, a connection built not on temporary excitement or emotional turbulence, but on the deeper harmony of two subconscious worlds recognizing that they belong in each other's lives. Ideas become powerful when we see them reflected in real life, and when we begin to look closely at meaningful relationships, we often notice something interesting. The ones that last, the ones that quietly shape a person's life in the most positive ways, often share the same emotional quality. They create peace. Not the kind of excitement that fades after a few months, not the kind of intensity that turns into emotional exhaustion, but a quiet stability that grows stronger over time. Consider the story of a man who once described meeting someone during a very ordinary moment in his life. There was nothing dramatic about their first interaction. They met through mutual friends and began speaking casually. At first, he didn't think much about it, but something unusual happened during their conversations. He noticed that when he spoke with her, he felt calm, not nervous, not pressured to impress. The conversation flowed easily. Even when there were moments of silence, neither of them felt uncomfortable. It was simply natural. But because the connection did not feel overwhelming or dramatic, he initially assumed it was just a friendly interaction. He had always believed that meaningful relationships were supposed to feel intense and emotionally powerful, so he dismissed the experience. Over time, however, they continued talking. Weeks passed, then months, and he began noticing something he had never experienced before. When life became stressful, speaking with her seemed to bring a sense of clarity and calm. Problems that once felt overwhelming suddenly seemed manageable. He felt more like himself when they were together, and eventually he realized something important. The peace he felt around her was not ordinary. It was something deeper. It was emotional alignment, a feeling that their inner worlds supported each other rather than competing for control. Another example comes from a woman who had spent years in relationships that were filled with emotional turbulence. Every connection began with excitement, strong attraction, intense passion, but over time those relationships always became unstable. Arguments appeared frequently, misunderstandings grew, emotional exhaustion followed. Eventually she began believing that love itself was supposed to be difficult, that relationships naturally involved constant tension and uncertainty. Then she met someone who seemed completely different. From the beginning, their conversations felt relaxed. There was no pressure to prove anything, no emotional games. They could talk about simple things without feeling bored. They could disagree without feeling threatened. At first she found this confusing, because the relationship felt calm instead of dramatic. Part of her wondered if something important was missing. But over time she began noticing the difference. She felt emotionally safe with him. She could express her thoughts without fear of being judged. Even during stressful situations, they worked through problems without escalating into conflict. For the first time in her life, she experienced a relationship that felt stable rather than chaotic, and gradually she realized that stability was not a lack of passion. It was the presence of harmony. The relationship allowed both of them to grow without constantly triggering each other's fears. Their connection became stronger over time because it was built on emotional cooperation rather than emotional competition. Stories like these appear again and again when people reflect on relationships that truly shaped their lives. Often the most meaningful connections do not begin with dramatic intensity. They begin with a sense of ease, a quiet feeling that the interaction requires less effort than usual. You feel comfortable being honest. You do not feel the need to carefully control every word. There is room for authenticity. This kind of emotional environment allows the subconscious mind to relax. Instead of operating in a defensive state, it begins supporting openness and trust. This is why relationships built on peace often become the most enduring ones. They create space for both individuals to develop emotionally, to support each other's goals, to face challenges without constantly feeling threatened by the possibility of losing the connection. And when we look at long-lasting partnerships across different cultures and experiences, a similar pattern often appears. The couples who remain connected over many years frequently describe their relationship in simple terms. They say things like, "I feel at home with this person. I can be myself around them. We understand each other even when we disagree." These statements reveal something important. They are not describing constant excitement. They are describing emotional safety, a feeling that the relationship itself is stable enough to allow both people to relax. And according to the principles explained by Joseph Murphy, this sense of peace reflects harmony between the subconscious minds of both individuals. Their beliefs, expectations, and emotional patterns are aligned in a way that supports cooperation rather than conflict. That harmony does not eliminate challenges, but it changes how those challenges are handled. Instead of turning disagreements into emotional battles, both individuals remain anchored in the deeper sense of connection. They work through problems together rather than turning against each other. And this is why peace is such a powerful sign. It reveals that the foundation of the relationship exists beneath surface emotions. It shows that the connection is supported by deeper compatibility within the mind. When two people create that kind of peace in each other's presence, the relationship begins to feel less like something that must constantly be maintained, and more like something that naturally belongs in both of their lives. Understanding this principle is powerful, but the real value comes from knowing how to recognize it and apply it in your own life. Because once you begin to understand how the subconscious mind responds to emotional harmony, the way you evaluate relationships starts to change. You stop looking only at external signs, and you begin paying closer attention to what is happening within your own mind and emotions. The first step is simple awareness. When you interact with someone, notice how your inner state changes in their presence. Do you feel calmer or more anxious? Do you feel comfortable being honest, or do you feel the need to constantly monitor your words and behavior? Do conversations feel natural, or do they feel like something you must carefully manage? These small emotional signals reveal a great deal about the deeper compatibility between two people. When two individuals resonate at the subconscious level, communication tends to flow more easily. You feel understood without having to constantly explain yourself. There is less tension beneath the surface. This does not mean you will always agree on everything, but disagreements do not immediately threaten the connection. The second step is learning to separate peace from boredom. This is an important distinction because many people mistake emotional calm for a lack of excitement. But peace is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of inner resistance. When you experience peace with someone, you are not constantly wondering where you stand. You are not analyzing every small interaction. Instead, there is a quiet sense of trust developing over time. This trust allows both individuals to express themselves more openly. You begin sharing thoughts and feelings more honestly because you do not feel judged. You feel accepted rather than evaluated. and this acceptance allows the relationship to deepen naturally. Another important step is releasing the belief that love must always feel dramatic. Drama often activates the nervous system in ways that feel intense, but intensity is not always a sign of compatibility. Sometimes intensity simply reflects unresolved fears being triggered. Peace, on the other hand, often reflects emotional alignment. It shows that both individuals feel safe enough to relax and be authentic. When the subconscious mind feels safe, it becomes more open to cooperation and understanding. This creates an environment where both people can support each other's growth. They listen more carefully, they respond with patience rather than defensiveness, and they approach challenges as shared problems rather than personal attacks. You can also apply this understanding by observing how the relationship affects your overall well-being. Do you feel more stable emotionally when you are connected to this person? Do you feel encouraged to grow and improve yourself? Or do you feel constantly drained and uncertain? Relationships that align with the subconscious mind often create a sense of support rather than emotional exhaustion. Even during difficult moments, there is still a deeper sense that both individuals are working toward the same goal. This feeling of cooperation is one of the clearest signs that the connection is built on harmony rather than conflict. Finally, it is important to give meaningful connections time to develop. Peaceful relationships often grow gradually. They deepen through consistent trust and shared experiences rather than sudden emotional intensity. Because they are not driven by dramatic emotional highs, they may appear less exciting at first, but over time, their stability becomes their greatest strength. The subconscious mind recognizes patterns of safety and harmony, and when those patterns repeat consistently, the relationship becomes stronger and more secure. By learning to recognize these signals within your own experiences, you begin making relationship decisions from a place of clarity rather than confusion. Instead of chasing emotional intensity, you begin appreciating emotional stability. Instead of seeking constant validation, you begin valuing authentic connection. And this shift allows you to recognize something many people overlook. The relationships that truly belong in your life rarely require you to become someone else. They allow you to become more fully yourself. When you begin to understand this principle, something inside you starts to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. Your entire perspective on relationships begins to shift. For most of their lives, many people search for love in a state of uncertainty. They look for approval. They look for signs that someone else values them enough. They chase intensity, believing that strong emotions must mean a strong connection. But once you understand the deeper harmony that exists at the level of the subconscious mind, you begin to approach relationships very differently. You stop asking one important question: does this person like me enough? And you begin asking a much more powerful one: how does this connection shape my inner world? Because the relationships that truly belong in your life do not constantly place your mind in a state of doubt. They do not force you to question your worth. They do not require endless emotional effort just to maintain stability. Instead, they create space for honesty, space for growth, space for both people to become stronger versions of themselves. And this understanding changes something fundamental about how you move through life. You no longer chase people who create confusion. You no longer feel drawn toward emotional chaos simply because it feels intense. Instead, you begin recognizing the quiet strength of harmony, the calm presence of someone whose inner world supports your own. This realization also brings a deeper sense of self-respect, because when you recognize the value of emotional peace, you stop tolerating relationships that constantly disrupt your sense of stability. You begin protecting your inner state. You begin choosing connections that encourage clarity instead of confusion. This does not mean you avoid challenges. All meaningful relationships involve moments of disagreement and difficulty, but the difference lies in how those challenges unfold. When two people share subconscious harmony, challenges do not feel like threats. They feel like opportunities to understand each other more deeply. Both individuals remain anchored in the knowledge that the connection itself is stable. And because of that stability, communication becomes more honest, fear becomes less controlling, trust becomes stronger. This is the kind of connection that allows people to grow together over time, not because everything is perfect, but because the foundation of the relationship is rooted in emotional alignment. And perhaps the most powerful change happens within your own identity. You begin seeing yourself not as someone searching desperately for love, but as someone capable of recognizing true harmony when it appears. You become more patient, more observant, more aware of the signals your own mind and emotions provide. You trust your inner responses instead of ignoring them. And as this awareness grows, you begin to notice something remarkable. The right connections in life do not require constant effort to feel meaningful. They unfold naturally. Two people simply continue showing up in each other's lives. They support each other through different seasons. They learn. They grow. And over time, the connection deepens in ways that feel both natural and powerful. This is what Joseph Murphy often tried to help people understand. Life is not random. The experiences we attract are reflections of the patterns that exist within our subconscious mind. When we carry beliefs that support harmony, understanding, and emotional balance, we begin attracting relationships that reflect those qualities. And when two people share those inner patterns, something very special becomes possible. A connection that feels less like something being forced and more like something being recognized. Two individuals meeting at a point where their emotional worlds support each other's growth, where understanding becomes easier, where trust develops naturally, where peace replaces constant uncertainty. And once you experience a connection built on that kind of harmony, it becomes much easier to recognize the difference between intensity and alignment, between temporary attraction and lasting compatibility, between emotional chaos and emotional peace. So the next time someone enters your life and something about the connection feels calm, natural, steady, pay attention to that feeling, because destiny does not always arrive with loud signs and dramatic moments. Sometimes destiny appears quietly, through a sense of emotional balance you cannot fully explain, through the feeling that you can finally relax and be yourself, through the quiet recognition that another person's presence brings peace rather than confusion. And when two people create that peace for each other, they may have discovered something rare, not just attraction, not just excitement, but a deeper harmony between two inner worlds, a harmony that allows both individuals to grow, support, and understand each other in ways that feel natural rather than forced. And when that kind of connection appears in your life, you no longer feel the need to chase love. You simply recognize it, because real alignment does not demand attention. It reveals itself through the quiet certainty that two people, in some deeply meaningful way, belong in each other's lives.